2,500 affordable non-market housing units, with this number expected to grow to approximately 4,000 units by 2041. To date, nonprofit organizations have been the primary developer of affordable non-market rental housing solutions, but there is a gap between what nonprofits can deliver and what the community needs. For example, recent assessments indicate that 320 non-market units are required to be produced or built annually to meet this need, but only 54 units were produced per year between the 2016 and 2022 construction years. Before going further, what is affordable non-market rental housing? It's housing that is geared towards low and moderate income singles and families, as it provides rental rates equal to or less than the average rates in the private market. Such rates are achieved through a variety of ways, but most commonly through large capital grants provided by senior governments. Now, I know there's often a discussion that affordable housing is the responsibility of other levels of government, and that local governments should stay focused on traditional services like water, sewer, and recreation. But our board has recognized that those services are not very useful, nor can the economy or life of our communities function if only a portion of the community can afford to live here. Time and time again, the clear priorities that Canadians are talking about are affordability and housing, and it's being recognized that all levels of government have roles to play. The CVRD board is saying this is an all-hands-on-deck situation to make positive change. Addressing this gap for affordable non-market rental housing will require bold new actions to accelerate the creation of new units, strengthen the supports to existing nonprofit housing organizations, and unlock new development opportunities by connecting available land with local housing organizations. We wanted to share some of the voices we've heard through previous housing assessment processes and community engagement. These voices could be anyone from a young person who is just starting out of high school or coming home after studying at a university or college, to families, to seniors, or anyone else who is struggling with housing. These testimonials are also coming from people who are working for local employers and businesses, but still struggling to make ends meet. Local government can play a critical role to help address these issues. The board is clear that it cannot solve housing affordability on its own, but there is certainly a role to be played. These headlines are just some of the examples at which businesses, both locally and across Canada, are having to deal with as it relates to housing affordability. There may be some instances where someone may be able to live with a family member or a friend, has a spare room to rent, but the reality is the model and system we have in place is not sustainable. So what can be done about it? Aside from our regulatory and policy role, the CVRD has two key services related to housing. Service 450, which is the Emergency Shelter and Supportive Housing Land Acquisition Service. It was created in 2009 when land for an emergency shelter was needed. It's a fully regional service covering the entire Comox Valley, and it includes funds for land acquisition as well as administration to determine best approaches for acquiring lands. It's important to note that BC Housing has announced plans to build a purpose-built shelter and supportive housing facility on Braidwood Road, and at the same time, our board has expressed interest to expand the focus, action, and support of Service 450 towards affordable non-market rental housing. In 2024, the requisition for this service was just under $700,000, or about $20 per year for an average home that's assessed at about $800,000. We also have Service 451, that's the homelessness support service. It was created in 2015. It's a service that provides grants to local non-profit housing and homelessness service providers. The town of Comox, in this case, is not a participant in the service, but it does contribute $40,000 annually to projects recommended by the Comox Valley Coalition to End Homelessness. The town also collects funds from its affordable housing contribution policy and brought 6 affordable units to the market with permanent town ownership, which are rented to Comox residents at BC Housing affordable rental rates. I share that as an example in how Comox is participating. In 2024, the requisition for this service was $421,000, or about $15 per year for an average home. As part of the Direct Action Approaches report, 3 levels of response were proposed. While the upper level of response promises greater community benefit, the board showed restraint in choosing the enhanced approach, or the middle level. The board recognizes financial pressures across the community and was mindful in its level of effort to assign to the housing response. The recommended approach offers a whole-of-community solution to the whole-of-community issue of affordable non-market rental housing. Addressing 3 pillars of need, the enhanced option involves building. So the RD would support the development and operation of new, affordable, non-market housing to complement the efforts of the nonprofit and private sectors. Secondly, increasing financial and capacity building supports. The CVRD would continue helping to strengthen the capacity of local organizations and nonprofits to plan, develop, and manage affordable housing. And then thirdly, accessing land. The CVRD will develop a non-market housing master plan. It would be a strategic tool to identify land for development of affordable non-market housing and inform options for development and planning purposes. Pursuing the direct development of housing represents a new set of responsibilities for the CVRD, one that requires financial commitment to ensure its success, particularly during the formative years. Several service delivery models were considered in our analysis, including creating an in-house entity, establishing a housing corporation, forming a community land trust, and providing financial and capacity supports to nonprofits. Examples of affordable housing models from several communities were considered from places like Tofino and Squamish, and larger locations and more established models in the Capital Region and Whistler. And from this, the board has opted for a model that takes elements from several approaches. A housing corporation would enable the RD to minimize and allocate risk, streamline decision-making and development processes, leverage grants and donations, generate profit for reinvestment, and create a centralized hub for collaboration and partnership with local housing organizations. Recognizing that no single actor can address the existing and growing demand for affordable, non-market rental housing, the RD's approach complements and provides valuable support to existing and potentially new nonprofit housing organizations within the region so that their projects and contributions are strengthened. To implement this approach, amendments to both Service 450 and 451's establishing bylaws are required. Service 450, that's the Emergency Shelter Supportive Housing Land Acquisition Service, it would require adjusting the service's purpose to include affordable non-market housing development activities and allow for the provision of support to a housing corporation in addition to increasing the maximum requisition for the service. For Service 451, it would only require increasing the maximum requisition. Both bylaw amendments will be put before residents through an alternative approval process in early 2025, pending tomorrow night's decision by the board. If approved, the RD would then develop the business plan and articles of incorporation for the housing corporation, establish a work plan, and determine the scope and scale necessary, including a budget to support the delivery of the services. This work will be undertaken in 2025, and feedback and input will be sought from the municipalities along the way to ensure that complementary efforts are considered and work plans across organizations are aligned. So what are the financial impacts of these proposed changes? While the board ultimately determines the budget for these services on an annual basis, the proposed maximum amount that could be requisitioned is as follows. For Service 450, it is proposed to increase the maximum requisition to $1.5 million. And for 451, it's proposed to increase the maximum requisition to $550,000. Now, I should note that those increases are the maximum that we would be able to requisition from ratepayers, not necessarily what the board would approve. We have many, many services that have maximum requisitions much higher than what is actually approved in the budgets. Our region's housing challenges will not be solved without action amongst all levels of government and sectors of society. We know that the federal and provincial governments are stepping up through ambitious new housing plans and bold investments. Through this proposal, the RD is seeking to join the growing number of local governments that are going beyond the status quo to take a direct role in the creation of affordable housing in partnership with senior governments. Studies suggest that the cost of inaction is substantially more expensive than the investments required to make housing more attainable, affordable, and balanced. Just consider for a moment the various impacts being felt by the business community. These include wage and salary pressures from their employees that are facing high housing costs, staff turnover and recruitment challenges from workers leaving the Comox Valley, productivity losses from a workforce that's facing housing instability and its related mental and physical impacts. And finally, on top of this, many businesses are also facing reduced sales revenues, which can be partly attributed to a decline in the disposable income from a large segment of the community. These costs and impacts also spread to other societal well-being. Just consider for a moment the young adults of our community. In the face of unaffordable rents and prices, many 20 and 30-somethings must make a choice between living with their parents, leaving the community, or living in precarious housing conditions. None of these options are catalysts for their well-being, upward mobility through education and employment, and contributing to the local economy and social cohesion. So with that, I think I'll take a pause, and if there's any questions or dialogue, that would be great. And then I do have just a couple more slides on transportation.
Awesome. Thanks, James. Questions, council? Nope.
Just a comment would be, just the downloading of the housing needs to municipalities. Yep, that's been pretty tough over the last several years. But I also agree that if we don't start doing something, the feds and the province aren't really making it super fast. So all hands on deck. I agree.
Yep.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It's noted that in your process for development, there was the AAP process, and then the Housing Corporation itself would develop its budget after that. And you commented on how the requisition was a maximum, not an immediate sort of number. So, how do you envisage that? Development, so we have some idea of what the 2025 budget looks like, and I understand that then 2026 and onward would probably be dependent on the work that was done assuming there was approval. Is that correct?
Yeah. So in early October, the board was presented with the Direct Actions Housing Report, which described those three models of service, or those three levels of service, I guess, and the middle level is what the board chose to pursue. And so that report speaks to the proposed budget of what 2025 can look like. I don't have the specific number here in front of me, but I can share that report with Michelle afterwards and share it with council. It's on our website. And so with that proposal in mind, the board supported the concept of moving forward with this middle approach, the enhanced approach. And then the maximum requisition, if this is approved in the service establishment bylaw, it is set in stone until such time as it's changed again. So the board would have to consider its articles of incorporation and the scope and scale of the housing corporation within that umbrella of that service.
Right. So the Housing Corporation's budget is effectively set by that requisition maximum, other than a further process. Right?
It would have to be set within the confines of that.
Yeah.
Piece. Okay. Right.
Go ahead.
Thank you for that presentation. So the Housing Corporation's role, would it or in your investigations of other communities like Whistler and Squamish, is the role of the Housing Corporation to look for further grant funding and identify partners within that process, or is it more of a hands-on, let's build ourselves?
It can be all of the above. It recognizing that the construction in the building is a massive undertaking, and that is something that would be that would take a lot of resources, I believe. The Housing Corporation can be a catalyst for finding additional funding and for supporting those nonprofits who maybe also have applications in the works or proposals in front of them. So the Housing Corporation could be that catalyst that would support the nonprofit organizations in doing the work that they're doing around construction.
So ostensibly you'd be more successful with proposals and getting federal funding with the presence of a housing corporation than if you were just to go it alone as a community like Cumberland. So
I believe so, and I think that the potential for partnerships and for leveraging funding, that's really what the root of this model is about. It's recognizing that no agent is able to do this on their own, and so that partnership is critical to be able to access federal level funding or provincial level funding, or undertake other partnerships with other parties.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
Awesome. Thanks. Go ahead, Councillor Ward.
And can I just follow up on that? I assume the Housing Corporation has borrowing authority. They're able to borrow.
So the Housing Corporation would be funded from the Service 450, which is the currently the emergency shelter land acquisition service. It would be intended to be funded from that service. And then if there's borrowing required, it could be funded through that service.
So it can go to the market or other borrowing sources to fund the development of a building.
Yeah, and the
that's
like the regional district, like all local governments in BC, we have the benefit of the Municipal Finance Authority,
Yeah.
which provides very, very favorable rates, and that regional district funding model would be used in this case.
So the housing authority would not be at such arm's length that it couldn't reach back to the MFA, so it could still access MFA funds. Is that the
Yeah, I think it would be the regional district itself through the Function 450,
right?
based on the work plan of the Housing Corporation, based on the priorities of the Housing Corporation and
Okay,
that
I
partnership.
understand. Right. Thanks.
Awesome, thanks. Will, did you want to add anything before we move on to the transportation piece?
No, I think James got it well in hand so far. Thanks.
Okay, great. I've seen lots of this, so I don't have any questions. But let's move on to regional transportation.
Okay. So, moving over to transportation. Great, thank you. So a key goal of our regional growth strategy is to develop an efficient and affordable multimodal transportation network that connects the Comox Valley as a whole. Private automobile transportation is the second largest annual household cost and the largest source of community greenhouse gas emissions. Plans like the Active Transportation Network Plan and Implementation Strategy and the 2022 Mobility Primer set the stage for why having an integrated transportation system that works for getting around the region as a whole makes sense. While the Comox Valley Regional District manages public transit as a region, there is no regional service to prioritize and take action on other non-vehicle forms of regional transportation. Lastly, transportation planning is best undertaken as a system that considers all jurisdictions and doesn't stop at local government boundaries. We all travel across boundaries to get to work and school, do grocery shopping, and play. The current situation creates challenges to advancing multimodal transportation projects. Projects are ad hoc and undertaken on a project-by-project basis. For example, recent planning work for active transportation projects have been done under the Regional Growth Strategy Service or the Electoral Area Planning Service. There is no consistent home for these initiatives. Municipalities are making investments in local mode-shifting infrastructure, but without the regional component, seamless connections for users between jurisdictions remains a challenge. Residents move around the Comox Valley without regard to jurisdictional boundaries. They may live in one area and work in another, so there is a great benefit to planning, designing, and building a network with a regional focus in mind. I come across an example of this every Saturday morning on my long runs. I start in Comox, I cross into Area B around Lazo, I'll come back into Comox, I'll move into Courtenay along Idians, and then I usually finish back in Comox, hopefully. I have not made it into Cumberland yet on my long runs.
There's a hill.
There's a hill, but I should try. So in consideration of all of this rationale, staff completed a regional service options analysis that looked at amending an existing service, creating a new service, or leaving things as the status quo. From the analysis, the RD is looking to amend the existing transit service to become a regional transportation service, allowing the CVRD to approach multimodal transportation on a regional scale. The benefits include the opportunity to focus on key regional modal shifting initiatives, and we can help build the spine that connects our communities. The Cumberland to Courtenay Connector is an example of this kind of opportunity. Complementing the work already underway within municipalities, and this is not intended to duplicate or supplant locally focused initiatives, but can help to tie them together. And then thirdly, having a dedicated service home for multimodal transportation projects, it allows the CVRD to support regional transportation planning and design, infrastructure, services and programs, advocacy, data collection, and monitoring, which all have value to the region as a whole. These changes are mostly administrative to allow the CVRD to work on regional transportation priorities, and the AAP in this case will not seek to change the current requisition for the service. A regional transportation service would coordinate local government efforts to shift transportation modes within the region. At present, there is no regional service dedicated to coordinating and advancing planning and construction of mode-shifting infrastructure beyond public transit. The Mobility Primer reminds us that to achieve our emissions reduction targets, relieve congestion, and support greater household affordability, multiple interventions are required. By working together to plan, design, construct, and maintain a regional network of mode-shifting transportation infrastructure, together we will have greater community impact. Staff have drafted a service framework presented to the board on November 26th that helps explain how each municipality and the electoral areas could work together to define a regional network and advance its planning, funding, construction, and long-term maintenance. And again, tomorrow night, we'll be asking the board to consider taking the next step in contemplating this regional transportation service by laying out some of the details for the AAP. And with that, that is the end of the presentation portion of the transportation topic. So
Thank you. Questions, council? Comments?
I thought this is one of the high priorities for this council is to try and have a connector with the rest of the valley, and I applaud your work on this. I think we all dream of a galloping goose of the north here. So, and you know, the CVRD or the Capital Regional District rather was instrumental in getting that all together. So I see the regional district here playing a excellent role in that as well. So we welcome this. Right, welcome it.
thanks.
Thank you. Yes, I echo Councillor Brecky's comments on that. You said there's no change in the requisition for this shift in service.
Correct.
Yeah. So that suggests that there's a similar amount of staff, FTE or time dedicated to the service, but a shift in focus.
Shift in focus, and there's no, in the service establishment bylaw, there's no change to the maximum requisition defined there. The budget for the service, which is considered every springtime by the board, may allow us to change focus and prioritize and not do some of this work that we've been doing off the side of our desks without focus. This allows us to put more energy and more specific attention on the work, and also gives the legislative authority to enter this conversation.
Yes, it's mostly yes, exactly. The legislative authority to work across multimodal. Yeah, is much appreciated. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just recently heard that for the alternative transportation that the board wasn't going to support, trying to help us connect that. So would this new service maybe deal with some of those issues?
So the you're speaking about the Courtenay to Cumberland connector. There was a staff report that was presented to the board 2 weeks ago, recommending grant funding be pursued for an early phase of the Courtenay Cumberland connector. That recommendation was not supported at the board table. However, the board did still proceed with the service framework that I mentioned earlier that would define how this new service can operate. And so if that service does get still put into place, active transportation is still a priority for the regional district through its network plan. The work in municipalities is still ongoing, and that ability to bring those two entities together and try to make for seamless connection and easier transitions between jurisdictions, so that cyclists, commuters, they don't see themselves crossing over jurisdictional boundaries. I think there is still opportunity for a lot of those projects and operational changes. The grant application for Courtenay to Cumberland Connector, that's been that was not supported at this time. It could be that it's submitted for another round of grant funding in the future.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, let's keep that project alive as long as we can. I think this service will go a long way to doing just that, to allowing us to plan regionally versus in little pieces, and specifically between areas and municipalities and getting through those. So happy to see this. And I will just say about the housing corporation, I think, and we've been talking off and on in Cumberland for a long time about whether or not we needed one and should we have one, because this is how we can move affordable housing forward in our community. And we just haven't had the capacity. And I think that's a big similarly to active transportation, especially large projects like the connector project, we really need to work regionally so that we have the capacity to do these major pieces of work. And one community is not taking that on all on their own. So thank you for the presentation. So you're just looking for feedback. You don't want us to generate some kind of official, because it's coming back to the board tomorrow. So
Yeah, I think it was, we felt it would be helpful to come and present.
Yeah.
And if Chair Cole Hamilton has anything he'd like to add, certainly it was helpful to share the thinking behind the board's decisions. And you're right, it'll be coming to the board tomorrow night to lock in the dates and the details around the AAPs, which would be undertaken in January and February.
okay.
And just a chance to have the discussion and dialogue here. And if you had any
Yeah.
specific questions, or if there was any direction or areas of interest, certainly we'd take that feedback. But the hope is that there'd be lots of dialogue between the staff and also the elected officials. And these are two very large, I think, they're changes in the way the work is done. And I think the board has recognized that there's value to making these changes. They're not small undertakings, and so they will take some time to realize the benefits of the change too. But they're for important reasons, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Chair Cole Hamilton, would you like to add anything?
No, I just would like to say at this point, just thank you so much for giving us so much of your time this evening. I know we all have full agendas at our council table, so just appreciate everyone's time and attention. And I'm in Ontario right now, but I'll be seeing you, Mayor, tomorrow night via Zoom at the regional district meeting. So again, thanks everyone for your time and thought on these issues.
Great. Thanks, Will. And thank you so much, James.
Okay.
Any other? No, that's it. Okay, we're good. There's a.
Need a
Yep.
motion to receive.
We do.
So I'll move that council receive a delegation from Commerce Valley Regional District regarding direct action on housing and regional transportation.
Thank you.
Second.
And a seconder, and all in favor. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, now to number 6, Mine Park Climbing Boulder. Boulders, I should say.
Boulders, that's right.
Boulders. 3.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. So last time Council saw this was in summer 2023 when the proponents wrote a letter to Council. And since that point in time, there's been a bit of back and forth. And then in August of this year, we received notice that they were ready to go. So by being ready to go, there's boulders that have been purchased, and it was moving forward as quick as possible to accommodate their requests in an effort to find a spot and the site details and all the other little details that come along with a project like this. So there's a few risks to identify. There's a discrepancy in the specs on the fall safety surfacing. We've put forward a recommendation, although there may be a small liability component with that based on discrepancy between the supplier versus the Canadian Playground Safety Standard. There is not, the project is being, outside of $2,000 in grant funding from the village, it's being entirely funded by the community, including donations from a number of local suppliers and AFC Construction, as well as the funding of the boulder from the proponents. So there's no contingency currently in the budget. We believe that the project can proceed with the resources now, but that is a risk that if we come up against something unforeseen. But yeah, as far as we understand, the boulders are being shipped to the valley and stored until the village is ready, should council wish to proceed, in which case it would be something staff would begin working on logistics and managing the construction and installation sometime early in 2025. So I'll turn it over to you and available for any questions.
Thank you, and thank you so much for prioritizing this project and getting it here to this point. I know it was a bit of a rush. Council, questions?
Just around that liability safety surfacing point, what is the and does it matter the physical form of the boulder at height? You know, I'm thinking of if you fall 10 feet from a square frame thing, you've got a straight 10-foot fall, or if are you sliding off the boulder and effectively falling at, you know, I don't know. Is it does the form of the boulder help to mitigate that 10-foot to 8-foot difference?
I believe. So is it the shape of the boulder, and would the potential fall result in like skidding down along it versus
Yeah, in other words, are you not going to be falling as badly because of the form of the boulder, or is this impossible to even explore?
Yeah, we think that the risk is minimal. We understand that a number of boulders would bring a crash pad. We also believe most of them are traversing. It's not a climbing wall where you're ascending and coming back down. It's a number of problems and you're traversing. So, but it's open to the community. Anyone who has the ability could get on top of it. And that's where the safety standard recommendation for the playgrounds would be that 10-foot fall height would require an additional cushion that the pea gravel does not provide. And sorry, maybe if I'm not answering the question now, I guess our concern with any of the other options is the staff resources required to maintain wood chip, or the engineered wood chip is simply not available in the budget, nor would the premium product of the pour in place, which is what we have at Village Park, which would come at a significant price tag. So on balance, we felt that this was a reasonable approach based on resources available, but we wanted to identify that as an issue. We don't believe it's going to be a big concern. Yeah.
Is there any safety signage associated?
There would be, yep.
Use at your own risk, for instance.
Yeah, that's what the third boulder, the signature boulder,
Yeah.
would enable that sign. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
In the map that's included in the link to Rockcraft, the people that build these things, most of their surfaces looks like sawdust or the rubberized, you know. So, but I think you're right. We don't have the budget for it, and nor do we have the maintenance capacity for it. So should we install pea gravel and the boulders, and we realize that that's not enough, would we just close then what?
It would be difficult to close.
Yeah.
Once I think the community has used it and feels as though it should be accessed. I think the wood chip option it's an incremental staff resourcing issue. It's not significant, but what we're seeing is a lot of small things add up.
Right.
And with pea gravel being the supplier suggesting it's a viable and safe option, it's the least resource intensive. The wood chip could be locally available, like arborist wood chip. That degrades faster and would just require more raking and top up. So that would be an option. It would be, I mean, it's not significant, but it would come with either an operation budget request or not doing something else around the community.
Okay. And could be added after.
We can change out that fairly easily. The pour in place, we haven't received any estimates, but it would be $10,000+ and has a limited lifespan. Like the Village Park's deteriorating quite quickly, and we've had it for I think 11 years now. So an ongoing replacement cost.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. There's a recommendation there. Oh, wait, I have one more question. So the Rotary's collecting funds, and they collected more than the $2,000 we gave them. Have we seen that cash come to us? It was estimated at about $3,000.
Yeah, I think the GoFundMe campaign.
Yeah.
That was going to go to the proponent who has financed the purchase.
Okay,
of them.
directly from Rotary, so we don't need to deal with that.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Okay, great. Now we have a motion.
All right. I'll move
More
that
questions?
council accept the donation and approve the installation of 3 climbing boulders valued at $52,800 in Number 6 Mine Park per the details outlined in the staff report dated November 29th, 2024, and that council directs staff to proceed to work with the project proponent to coordinate donated construction and installation services valued at $19,800.
I'll second that.
All in favor? And that is carried unanimously as well. Thank you, Kevin. And now we're on to community events and bookings. Okay, you're going to stay. Ryan's going to join.
Good evening.
Ryan?
So yeah, presenting tonight the draft community events and bookings policy. It was presented to the committee of the whole last month. The draft before you tonight is virtually identical to what you would have seen then, save for 3 small changes. So the first is that we added some explicit wording to section 7A to make it clear that the cumulative impact of on a park or facility would be considered in assessing an application, which was requested by the committee. We added at the end of the policy a section 44 that states that a list of major recurring events be brought to council for review every 4 years within a year of the swearing in of each new council, again as requested. And then the one change we made that wasn't discussed at the committee of the whole meeting, but it was identified recently as a small gap in the policy. In clause 42, where the policy discusses reasons that a permit may be revoked, we just added park conditions related to a weather event. And the need for that was made apparent a couple weeks ago when we had a lot of rainfall and a couple sports field bookings had to be canceled because just to preserve the longevity of the field, the turf conditions weren't that great. This isn't a new practice. It's something that we've been doing. It's more codifying an existing practice. Yeah, and typically, nobody likes their bookings being canceled, but people tend to get it and they're understanding.
It's a bomb cyclone.
It was a bomb cyclone, exactly. Otherwise, the policy should look very familiar. I did want to take a moment just to mention some recent communication that we had from a local resident who wrote into staff and council with some concerns about the policy as it's written. Generally, this resident had some concern about council's involvement in event approvals. Specifically, that council shouldn't be weighing in on event applications. I had a good chat with them. Explained at some length that there's no intention for every major event application to be going to council. I suppose we landed at a respectful difference of opinion. At the end of the day, I believe that the policy does strike an appropriate balance, leaving the primary responsibility for event approval and the event application process with staff, while enabling council to weigh in on particularly impactful events. This resident's other major concern was the approval authority for events with 100 more people or more that's granted to the Cumberland Fire Department in the policy. That's in section 30. I wasn't able to relieve his concerns during the conversation, but since then, and as I promised to him, I thought more about it. I had another chat with the deputy fire chief just to get some more context around it. His response to me was that it's important that he sees the site layout for large events, just to confirm that emergency access is maintained, that they do have an emergency plan should something go awry. Ultimately, as he explained to me, the fire department is responsible for the public safety, and so the deputy chief is really just doing his due diligence to ensure that a safety plan is in place. There's no intention for the fire department to be withholding approval for any other reason if there's a safe event. So yeah, again, with that in mind, I feel that the wording as presented is appropriate. But I'll put that and anything else back over to you fine folks.
Thank you so much for this. Questions? Anybody?
I'll move that council approve policy number 15.1, community events and bookings.
Second.
Thank you. Anybody have any comments?
I do
Or
have some
questions?
questions.
Sorry.
Questions and comments, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. That point of fire department approval, there's aren't there other places where plans are required within an event application? A traffic management plan or there's various levels of plans that are required for large events.
Within this policy?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and it all depends on what's being applied for.
Yes. If that plan is not satisfactory, I assume that obviously you'd work with the applicant, but if you get to a point where any given plan is unsatisfactory, I'm guessing you would might be minded to say no, you can't have your event. It seems like the fire and emergency access plan is of the same nature, so it's kind of, rather than specific, it's like explicit approval, disapproval based on the fire department's. So I'm just trying. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to explain that distinction is like all of those aspects of an event are subject to the particular the member of staff's particular.
That's right.
Approval, right?
Yeah, traffic management plans are approved by the director of operations. So on and so
and if
forth.
any given plan isn't approved, the event isn't approved.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I'm just trying to balance a bit the the sort of community. There's two things. One is any aspect of within this priority list, and I think it's less a priority, like it's a priority guideline. You might almost, you wouldn't score things, but you would mix and match from this priority list, given, because all events are different, right?
Is this section 9 you're referring to?
Section 9, sorry. And whether there's something in there about the community's experience, and how does the community's experience of an event sort of reflect back on the prioritization? Right.
There is a line, I can't remember off the top of my head which clause it is. In fact, I think it's clause 7. The Village of Cumberland will process event applications by, and then one of those items is looking at how they've adhered to past policies. 7B. Yeah, considering the applicant's past events and history of abiding by terms of past permits. So that's where, if an event came in last year and completely ran crazy in the park and we had lots of complaints and lots of damage, then that would be weighed into the consideration.
Okay, thank you. I think, and then on reflection, it's that very last, we talked about that very last line of, council reviewing the policy. I mean, I'm minded that I think we should absolutely give council an opportunity to review the policy. The sort of, along with a current list of major events, suggests that we'd be reviewing each single event or looking at the event list. Kind of feel that I feel I've got some sympathy with the comments received. That if the events don't match what the community is expressing they want, we should look at how to express that in policy. Can we create a policy that clearly defines, rather than that some given event is no longer meets the community's sort of aspiration, because that would steer events as a whole rather than feeling like we're picking winners over individual events. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, and I think that the part of the policy as it's currently drafted that speaks to that is just that we consider whether an event is in line with council's strategic priorities. And then to the point of bringing the policy back to review, it's my understanding, I could be wrong, as a council policy, you could make that decision at any time, is that right? To bring the policy back or reconsider it?
I'm sure we could at any time, but I kind of like the fact that there's a regular review built into this, like a 4-yearly or something review, especially. I think the reason we suggested after an election was because if a council has changed, then there may be reasons that the community has elected different people to this table with different, so it's not a bad cycle to review policy. But I'm wondering about taking out that clause about, along with the current list of major recurring events, because the list of events would be an input, like a piece of data you bring to determine whether your policy is working, rather than a list that we're thinking of going down and going yes, no, yes, no, right?
Yeah, and I guess, council could do with that list what they like. The way I sort of imagine it working is, we present the list, and that's council's opportunity, whether it's council, whether it's committee of the whole, whatever it is. It's their opportunity to provide some direction to staff, give us some indication, hey, maybe the way this event is operated isn't in line with what we like. And then staff could then take that into account when deciding at the CAO level whether a future event application gets brought to council.
It's also an opportunity to address the seasonality issues of the bunching up of events during spring and fall, which can lead to some of those cumulative impacts. Like staff, I think, have an easier time assessing individual events, but it's once you start how much the third weekend of 3 major events that are impacting residents are harder for us to assess. What is the community's tolerance for traffic, noise, those types of things that might be fine as a one-off. So that's the idea, is that we would have that opportunity to bring forward that full schedule on that timeline, and council will get to see here is what is being issued. And then the other part is around that CAO discretion, and it's not just reserved for new events, but I think it largely would be to bring forward if there's something that seemed to have risks or impacts beyond what staff can assess. Council would have an opportunity to weigh in.
Yeah, I don't have any challenge with that. I think, the day Taylor Swift decides to have a concert in Cumberland, you'd probably bring it to council to discuss the impacts, right? And so there is that piece of staff may say, put their hands up and say, we really need some council guidance on this particular one. I think that's absolutely appropriate. I'm just sort of, more trying to do as much as we can through policy, so that you don't need to bring us things because it's clear, right?
Mm-hmm. So, do you want to respond first? I have additional comments in that same sort of vein. So I think the intention of this whole kind of review process wasn't necessarily to bring so that council was deciding on each event, but that we ensure that we have a policy that's speaking to our strategic priorities and our interests and the community feedback we get, so that staff is empowered to make those good decisions. I like the idea of reviewing the policy every 4 years, and I like the chart that's been built in this process, and continuing to watch the evolution of that, and how, because there is a seasonality. If we can't do trail events through whatever it is, 5 or 6 or 8 weeks in peak wildfire season, stuff gets really bunchy on both ends of that, and limits the space we have. My biggest concern is that because we're getting so full of events, we have limited capacity to allow new events to emerge. So if we had some amazing new event come, but they can't find a spot in the calendar, we don't really have a mechanism to shift that. And so part of the my concern around that is in the priority booking that say previously permitted public events sort of have a leg up, which again doesn't allow new events to emerge. So I don't want to try and sausage make that piece of this policy right now, but I do want you to go away and think about that piece. Like, how would we, surely someone is doing this somewhere where they have a way of, I don't know, rotating events. There are other communities that are tourist destinations that have major, I don't know if anybody actually does this. We do events really well. It's part of our culture. We don't want to change that. We just want to make sure when the tipping point starts to happen, we have a mechanism to, one, refresh the events, and two, make sure we have a way of saying, oh, now everybody's mad at us and it's too many, or whatever, hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that the closest we come right now is, and again, I'm not sure which line it is, but it's somewhere in there, that the point in time at which we apply that priority, basically an event has to have their application in 9 months before their event. So 3 months after their last year's event, they've got to submit their next one. And so essentially what we said is, we're not going to give you a full approval or any approval for your event before that 9 months, because at 9 months out, we need to look at, okay, is there anybody else who's applied for the same date? What are the conflicts? And that's the point at which we can conduct that assessment.
Okay, so heads up, anyone who wants to do a new event, you need to get in front of, or you need to do more than 9 months,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think, is what we're saying. Okay. So, yeah, so that's my thoughts on that. Anybody else?
Well, I'm minded to move an amendment. If we're going to approve this policy today, I'm minded to first try to see if there's support for an amendment that that clause 44 we lose the wording along with a current list of major recurring events. And we leave that as a piece of data that you're bound to bring with any review of a policy. You will bring that chart. I know you will, because the reports you brought before about this have been, fulsome and interesting and good. So rather than leave the ambiguity that suggests that council should review this policy and review major recurring events, which is the ambiguity I see in this, I'd like to, I would like, this is the correct parliamentary approach. I move an amendment because the motion's on the table, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I would like to move that we amend the motion to remove the wording, to remove the clause along with the current list of major events from Article 44. And I just want to see.
So it would just say review the policy, that's it?
It would just say that the council shall review this policy, within 1 year following a general election.
Second that.
Okay, is that what we needed to do, Rachel, to amend that? And now we vote.
Vote on the amendment.
Vote on the amendment. So we are now voting on the amendment. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Do we need to go back and that's good?
And now we vote on the policy.
Now we vote on the main motion.
The
Okay, now we
amended
need to
motion.
kill your, no, now we need to kill his old motion. Yes?
No, we didn't vote.
On the amended main motion.
With the change. Oh, right. Now we're doing the whole thing. Okay, I got it. I'm with you.
I'll move the council approve policy number 15.1, community events and bookings with the amended change.
Second. All in favor. And that's carried unanimous. Good job, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Kevin, for that, and for all your work that led up to that. Now we're on to Comox Valley Emergency Management Warming Cooling Center Agreement. And here you are.
Here I am.
So convenient.
I try to make it easy for you all. So yeah, this is an agreement that would allow Buchanan Hall, which is the lower level of the cultural center, to be used by Comox Valley Emergency Management as an emergency warming center or cooling center. The primary focus really is on the warming centers, which are, again, not to be confused with a shelter. They're drop-in spaces, no sleeping amenities. They're a place that offer refuge from the cold, usually, a warm drink, a snack, when specific weather thresholds are met. They'd occur overnight. When the facility is not typically used by recreation and culture programming, and they'd be staffed by a qualified and experienced team under contract to CVEM, Comox Valley Emergency Management. Also, they're intended to serve the needs of our local community, not the broader Comox Valley. I should add that the hours for the warming center activations have been defined in the agreement as 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Because that's the time that allows us to activate it without interfering with any regular programming. It's the amount of time we can commit to that also allows for time for setup and cleanup afterwards. If we have an activation, we don't have the space programmed first thing in the morning the next morning, and there's mutual interest in extending the activation, the agreement doesn't necessarily preclude that. The agreement also states that the village must confirm availability for any requested activation, and that reasonable changes can be made between us and the CVRD over the life of the agreement. About the contractor, I've met with her. She's very confident in her team's ability to manage any issues that could arise from the warming center. She's very excited that this is something that council is considering for the community. She sees it as a definite need. And she's got a lot more experience working with our local vulnerable populations than I do. Security personnel would also be on site. The same contractor has ran at least a couple of warming center activations in the city of Courtenay. I've chatted with staff there, and they're really happy with how it went. They've got a much different, I think, they're serving a much different population than we are. But yeah, she said that they went really well. Financially, we don't anticipate many additional costs to arise from the activation of a warming center, but any incremental costs that do come up, extra cleaning, any maintenance, repairs, that kind of thing, they would be recoverable from the provincial government through Comox Valley Emergency Management. And again, just to be clear, operation, security, setup, cleaning are all the responsibility of the contractor who is hired by CVEM. Like I said earlier, the agreement also allows for the activation of cooling centers. These could be stood up in the case of an extreme heat emergency. Again, there's distinct thresholds that would be met for one of those to be declared. The hours of activation aren't explicit in this agreement. We just say that they need to be confirmed on a case-by-case basis. And that's because the nature of cooling centers, they need to be set up during the peak of the day when other things are going on in the facility. What staff would likely do is continue with the current practice of when there is an extreme heat warning. We would amplify the messaging from Comox Valley Emergency Management. We'd promote where different cooling centers are, or places to get cool in the community anyways. And we usually, well, no, we always do, have some ice water available in the foyer of the recreation center. In the case of an extreme heat warning that's issued by Environment and Climate Change Canada, that's another step above. That's probably where we would consider looking at activating a cooling center in Buchanan Hall. And that's where it is more of an emergency situation, and we'd have to determine what programs are canceled, what the implications are, that kind of thing. One small change that's going to be made before any signing of the agreement, assuming it's approved, and thanks to a resident for pointing this out, is that our signature block at the bottom of the agreement will be changed from the Village of Cumberland to the Corporation of the Village of Cumberland. That was just an oversight. So yeah, in summary, the agreement's really just about providing for our community's most vulnerable residents when it's really hot and really cold. CVEM has all the resources to provide a warm or cool space for those who need one. We have a facility that can accommodate them. So this agreement is really just the formal mechanism that will hopefully bring it all together. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Ryan. Questions, comments?
Well, I just have a comment. I know it's generated a bit of controversy, but I think this is, basic decency to provide a service like this. I know, Courtney down below or in the Native Sons Center there, it's gone very well for them. Likewise with the warming, like the extreme heat scenario, you're looking at a vulnerable population, a lot of elderly people as well that may not have air conditioning in their houses and that. So I think, just for us as a village with the space, it's the least we can do. So, and it's, we're not setting up a long-term bedding situation or anything like that. Right. And, last thing a first responder wants to do in the morning is shake someone awake in the cold that doesn't wake up. So you have to think about that too.
Yeah, I'm just happy to hear about the security provisions and just the language about staff consent, but happy for this report. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd second that. I'm glad that this is being funded through the CVRD services. I think that the vulnerable population is much bigger than many of us imagine, and these needs are when they arise, they are dire and they are life-threatening, and so I think it is important. I see, and there's been concern about the language around transportation. I think this is, absolutely clear that there's a clause there that helps us deal with the circumstance when a first responder finds someone just outside the village boundary and says, I need to take you to the nearest place, and we have a mechanism for doing that even though they're not directly within the Cumberland boundaries. So I appreciate that the level of thought that's gone into the agreement to cover the various possibilities, right, and risks. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you so much for collaborating on this. I appreciate it. Who wants to read that recommendation?
I'll move that council enter into the temporary emergency facility use agreement between the Village of Cumberland and the Comox Valley Regional District, and authorize the Mayor and Chief Administrative Officer to execute the agreement, and that council endorse the interim procedure of activating a cooling center upon the declaration of a Stage 2 extreme heat emergency event for the region until such time as a formal policy is adopted.
I'll second that.
Seconder, all in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you. And now we're on to Local Government Leadership Academy Leadership Forum in February, March?
March.
It's March.
March 12th to 15th, I believe, which is a Wednesday to Thursday. So, yeah, council's conference policy doesn't contemplate council members attending LGLA, which is a leadership development opportunity to improve governance at the local level. So we're recommending that council consider it on a case-by-case basis, which you have done in the past. And if there is any council member that receives approval to attend from council, that council also approve expenditure of $2,000 per person to be funded through the General Financial Stabilization Reserve. And this is to cover registration and hotel room accommodation, mainly in Richmond. Thank you.
And transportation, because can't take the hello to Richmond,
A bit of transportation.
unfortunately. Maybe they'll build a hello to go to Richmond. Anyway, comments, questions, interest?
I'm definitely. I think the topic particularly. I mean, I haven't been to one of these before, but I hear from my colleagues that they are a valuable and useful thing. And this topic is effective engagement and transparent governance. I think engagement and transparency is ever a big topic. And I think I can fit it in around birthdays and wedding anniversaries, which happen right at that time.
Ooh,
You can zoom into
Richmond's
those.
lovely.
So yes. So pending like a double check at home, I am interested. If yeah.
Yep, good idea.
Have a blast.
It's terrible. So there's a recommendation there? Maybe someone outside of the person that wants to go wants to read that recommendation?
Could be
Oh,
specific
sorry.
about
About who's going?
who's going and
I'll move the count.
Should we, I mean, I haven't heard from Councillor Tyrion, but he's not here to say. Should we build that in case he wants to go? Did he tell you if he wanted to
Yeah,
go?
I-
Troy, are you out there listening to us?
but if
No.
you did want to leave that option open, I would increase
This
it to
might
the
feel like it's kinda like
$4,000.
First year kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sure.
Like we never went back.
Okay. Well, you can always bring it back to us too if he really
Fair,
is
yeah,
keen. Okay, go for it.
Where do we go? I'll move the council approve the expenditure of up to $2,000 per person to be funded through the General Stabilization Reserve. Should I be mentioning directly the councillor?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll move the council approve the expenditure of up to $2,000 for Councillor Ward to be funded through the General Financial Stabilization Reserve and direct staff to bring forward an amendment to the adopted 2025-2029 financial plan bylaw to reflect this expenditure.
Second.
All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Go get
Thank
the
you.
info and bring it on home. Tell us how to do all the things. Okay, now on to ACIT geothermal project, FCM grant application.
Okay, thank you, Council. So the purpose of this report is to seek Council approval and a funding commitment to proceed with a scoping study for the geothermal study being done by ACIT on behalf of the village. And also to seek council support to submit a non-binding pre-application to the Green Municipal Fund grant program. So council's been updated 3 times on the study and the feasibility work that's being done by ACIT. And latest is that they recommend that council commit $10,000 towards a scoping study by an engineering firm that specializes in this type of work. And that is new. That actually isn't outlined in the previous 3 reports that this would be needed. And the other part is that that would help then to define the scope, and then that would be what the ACIT team would use towards a grant application. And the grant application is about $200,000, and that is somewhat new as well. That wasn't really contemplated in the last 3 reports. So staff are saying if council wishes to move forward with this next stage, they could use host amenity funds. There is some money left in that fund. And the other new item is that about 15 to 25 hours would be needed for this scoping study of staff time. And work plans haven't actually been looked at for that yet. So yeah, at this point I couldn't tell you who could actually do that work, to be honest. It was suggested by a couple of people who are actually really full of at capacity, so we'll have to try to figure that part out. And then finally, then once the grant application's been submitted, and if it was approved, it would be another probably 16 hours of just one staff member's time at that point. The scoping study would take, I think, 4 different staff members to add up to those hours. So if council does wish to move forward with this, I did make a few recommendations of council motions that would be needed.
Questions? Comments?
We've gone this far.
Well, I've not been along for the full ride here. What is the outcome or deliverable of the scoping study? I couldn't quite tease this out of this report.
Yeah. So the way it was explained to me is and the mayor might be able to help as well with the details on this, but is that it's needed for them to be able to use to put the grant application in. It's to help scope out what the next phase of the study would be, the testing and that kind of stuff for use for the grant application. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's we need an engineer is what we need, and the lead project person is not the right skill set.
It doesn't have the engineer stamp.
Right.
I guess, yeah.
And so we need, so Falcon Engineering, which has worked on the VIU project, wanted to do a much larger scoping project, but ACIT has already done a bunch of that work. So we reduced that scoping project, which is basically, again, looking at the mine shaft, which areas are, like looking at those maps, trying to figure out what's connected to what and how big the pool of water, how big the amount of water is, and that sort of thing. And then that feeds into the grant, the $200,000 grant, which is to actually drill the holes to test the water and make sure that the water is clean enough and not contaminated by other things, waste or whatever is it down there, which we don't really know.
Okay, so we're getting some, I'm guessing in here, but we're getting some initial, effectively thermal energy indications that there's probable feasibility. That's the scoping. The scoping gets us as far as feels like there's enough scope and energy down there to make this worthwhile. And then the $200,000 gets us to like ground proofing of that, plus more technical feasibility.
I believe so, and I think the staff time is more around the demand side or the facilities.
Yeah, it's to deal with the information that would be needed from the village to feed the scoping. So there would be some attendance at the kickoff meeting with the engineers, and then whatever work that they needed from us for internal information.
Oh, I can easily see the 15 hours of that. I'm just trying to get closer to some of the. I mean, I see that this 10,000 is it's a pretty low investment for scoping, and if the grant is successful, most of it comes back anyway. So I'm comfortable with that. It's seeing more detail, I think, for me. I've probably just missed it along the way, or not had an opportunity to ask the questions that would pull it
There's
out.
not a lot of detail right now because we just don't know. That's part of what.
Part of the
Yeah.
scope, but
Yeah.
okay.
And it looks like
Yeah.
we can pull half of that $10,000 back if
Yeah.
we're successful for the grant.
Yeah.
So, but we're never going to get the grant unless we
Unless we do
do
this piece.
this type of scoping. So,
Yeah.
Sorry, and I also miss some of that staff time is grant administration and grant
Right.
submission and everything. So
Finance
not
department.
just at the.
Yes.
And so it could come back to the. Oh, anyway, we could. Yeah.
All right. I mean, there's a lot of hypothesizing going on here, right? So, we haven't got the expert in the room, but
Sorry,
But
one more thing. Sorry to interrupt. Zachary I will try to get Zachary at the January 13th meeting when the grant application does come back. So
Yeah.
more information can be provided, and I will get either remotely or here
Yeah.
for that meeting.
No,
So
thank
you
you.
can
I
ask
was-
those questions.
I was going to say that I'll definitely support let's do the scoping work. The non-binding pre-application, that sounds useful to get us in progress for a grant, but before investing staff and time and energy in a full grant application, definitely clarity over the objectives and deliverables just feels that's important.
Okay. There's a recommendation there.
Well, then I'll do that. I'll recommend council approve the expenditure of up to $10,000 to be funded through the Comics Valley Waste Management Host Amenity Funds for a scoping study of the Cumberland Mine Water Geo-Exchange District Energy System project for preparation of a grant application submission. Deep breath.
Thank you.
more.
And that council direct staff to bring forward an amendment to the adopted 2024 to 28 financial plan bylaw to reflect this expenditure. And that council supports the submission of a non-binding pre-application to the GMF, Green Municipal Fund, Community Energy Systems Grant.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, and UBCM community to community funding. Back to you, Michelle. Oh, sorry, Rachel.
Right. We're bringing this report to council to request endorsement of an application to the UBCM Community to Community program. And the program supports First Nations and local governments opportunities to discuss common goals and opportunities for joint action. So we have drafted an application for this program. We received a letter of support from KFN late last week. The application was submitted by the deadline on December 6th, Friday, and it was quite broad, as this is a beginning conversation between the councils about potential services and partnerships that could happen in the future. Just a beginning conversation for relationship building. And the majority of the funding in the application is for the forum itself, for facilitation and some research, consultant time for research to prepare for the forum. We're expecting the forum would take place later on in 2025. And the total funding on the application was just under $19,000. Portion of the application was for the forum itself, and we did submit a portion for the development of any agreements or protocol agreements that sort of come out of that forum to lead the two governments to future discussions. So if council has any questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you. No questions? I'm super excited about this. Yeah, let's do it. Anybody want to make the motion?
The council support an application to the UBCM Community to Community program for funding to host a community-to-community forum with the Comox First Nation for relationship building and to explore and develop agreements for partnership opportunities to a maximum of $20,000, and that council commit the village to overall grant management of the funds.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And all in favor? That's unanimous as well. And there are council member monthly reports there. And If anyone has any questions, I have a question for Councillor Barecki.
Oh, please.
The CJC event on February 19th, is that?
That is in place of the Campanola
It
lecture
is.
series, and they decided to change up the format a little bit.
Yeah.
Moving away from,
Lectures.
the lecture series and having more of a participatory approach to it. So it's going to include a speaker who's looking at polarization within the communities, and then there's going to be a fireside chat with the panel afterwards, and an ability for the audience to ask questions and participate as well. And moving away from the dinner and
Yeah.
that type of thing. So it's I'd like people to sign up, and I'll have more information and be posting more about it closer to the date, because no one remembers what's going to happen in February necessarily. But,
No, but
it
yeah.
will be held at North Island College at the lecture theatre there, and I'd encourage members of the public and council to attend that.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks really interesting. So make sure you get us the registration so we can all go.
I certainly will. Yeah, we're just working out ticketing right now, and
Right.
and the logistics of that. So me and Councillor Hillian and Karen McKinnon, as well as Neil. Can't remember his last name, but he's from the college, North Island College.
Okay.
There, we're all working together on a subcommittee to get this organized. So
Awesome.
appreciate the efforts of the CJC to bring an event like this to the community. I think it's rather timely.
Yeah. Good work happening there. And I just want to apologize for the length of my report. I just put it all together because I couldn't remember where I stopped, and so. If there's no questions,
All right, I
there's
will.
a recommendation. Yeah.
I'll move the council receive the member monthly reports for October and November 2024.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor? And that's unanimous as well. And then there's a financial plan bylaw for second and third reading.
I'll move the council.
And sorry, just
Oh, sorry.
before you move that,
Oh.
Andre has to come up and just let you know about the feedback, if there was.
Okay. Has there been feedback, Andre?
Well, that's going to be my my message. So, yeah, just to let you know that we have received no further feedback on the financial plan from the public since your first reading of November the 25th.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I'll give.
Yep,
All right.
go for it.
I'll give first or second, third readings to the 2025-2029 financial plan bylaw number 1216, 2024.
Seconder?
Second.
All in favor? That's all four of us. That's unanimous. And then utility rates, frontage tax bylaws for final adoption.
I'll move that council adopt the following bylaws: water service frontage tax amendment bylaw number 1217, 2024. Sewer service frontage tax amendment bylaw number 1218, 2024. Stormwater service frontage tax amendment bylaw number 1219, 2024. Solid waste collection fees amendment bylaw 2020, 2024. Water rates amendment bylaw number 2021 or 1221, 2024, and sanitary sewer rates amendment bylaw number 1222, 2024.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously as well. There's no new business, so notices, motions, and announcements. There is a public information meeting for the Village of Cumberland proposal for a zoning amendment for 3345 2nd Street on Tuesday, tomorrow, December 10th, 5 to 7 p.m., right here in Council Chamber. If you have questions about this affordable housing development, please do come and find out more information. Question period. Are there any questions for us? Our audience has dispersed. I don't see anyone. No. So,
We
nothing.
did have some questions submitted earlier today. There's quite a few, and I will, from this one writer, I did forward them to the manager of recreation, but I can pick out a couple for
Okay.
council tonight, if
Yeah.
that's acceptable to you. One of the questions was, how will you ensure Cumberland will stay safe long-term? And that combined with the question that we don't have police in the village, how will Cumberland stay safe in the long term? With the warming center, sorry.
With the warm, I was like,
Yes.
relating to, so the warming center will have security. It also has an operations manager, and we can also request that staff are there. So we don't foresee any issues around Cumberland becoming unsafe. The warming center is an overnight place for people to warm themselves. It is not housing. It is not bringing people from outside of our community. It is a place for people who are vulnerable in our community to go and warm up.
Okay. On the same topic, biggest question of all, are you prepared to deal with consequences and or conflicts that may arise from patrons using the facility? And if so, please explain how.
I don't know why we would assume that someone using a warming center would create problems. However, I understand that there is fear out there around people who are unhoused. And so we would absolutely accept consequences. That's why we have an agreement with the CBRD that limits that risk. And that's why we have security on site and all the other things I just said.
There's a question regarding the climbing boulders. Would the village's insurance cover the injuries?
I'm guessing we have insurance that is that, but there's also, there will also be signage on the boulders that clearly says use at your own risk. So there is that as well, personal responsibility.
Yeah, it would be no different than the skate park.
Yeah.
There's signage there, talks
the
about people
playground.
taking their own risk. We have ambulance, fire, who may go there for a broken leg or anything for the same thing.
Yeah.
So it would be similar.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks. Okay, so there's a closed portion there. Recommendation for that, please.
Council close the meeting to the public pursuant to Section 90 of the Community Charter to consider labor relations or other employee relations for the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? All right.
Okay.